One of the more advanced features that Blackboard offers around testing is the ability to do fully randomized tests, which means that each student will get a different set of questions based on a much bigger collection of questions. To set up a fully randomized test, you generally need a fairly large body of questions to pull from. This is because you're drawing on a subset of questions, and in order to have everything fully random, there need to be more questions than you want each student to get in their test. Now, you can use questions that you've already set up for previous tests, or you can also draw questions from pools of questions. So if you, for instance, have publisher resources that you've been given for your course, most of those will go into Blackboard as question pools, and you can grab questions from that to make the test as well. Since Blackboard offers both tests and pools, it can be helpful to understand the difference between them. If I go in my course, to my course tools, I'll have the option to access tests, surveys, and pools. The difference between tests and pools are that tests can be administered to students. Pools, on the other hand, cannot. So pools are basically just sets of questions that sit on the back end of Blackboard. And then if you want to get those questions out to students, you would set up a test that pulls questions from the pool into the test and then deploy that test to students. To set up a fully random test, you're first going to go into your tests area. From here, you can build a test. So that's going to need a name. In this case, we'll call it random test. And I'm going to click on Submit, which will take me through to the test canvas. So what I'm going to do here, instead of the usual option of creating a question, is go to this option here, which says Reuse Question. Now, there are actually two different options here that do kind of the same thing, but with some slight differences. So Create Random Block is going to grab all questions of a particular type. When I'm building a test, I usually prefer to go to Create Question Set because it lets me go a lot more granular and in a lot more detail, and it gives me more finesse over what I choose to put out in the world for my students. So in this case, I'm going to choose that option here. When I choose Create Question Set, that's going to pull up a new window. And what this is going to let me do is it's going to let me isolate the questions that I want to use. So if you come over here in this menu to the left, you can see that you've got a number of different things to choose from. And if I open out something like pools, you can see that I have a number of different sets of questions available to me, each of these based on a chapter or a module. And this is a really handy way to do things because it does let you isolate questions based on that chapter or module so that you can fairly easily say, I want for each test, for each student to receive this many questions from this chapter and then this many questions from this chapter. So it helps you to keep your distribution even. So in the case of this test, let's say that I want to grab a number of questions from that module 1. So if I click on Module 1, that's going to pull up just the questions that are associated with Module 1. And from here, I can either choose to select all of those questions, or I can choose to select or deselect only the ones that I want. So I'll grab those questions, and I'll click on Submit. And what this is going to do is create a question set for me. Looking at my question set, I can see that I have 22 questions that I've selected here. So let's say on a test that what I actually want is for each student to get 10 of those questions. All I have to do is tell Blackboard that I want 10 questions to be the number of questions that will be displayed, and then click on Submit. So what I've effectively done is I've said each student is going to get 10 of these available 22 questions. And that means that the testing will be random for each student. The other thing I can do here is I can change the points per question. Blackboard does tend to default to 10 points per question. And if I go in here click on that box, I can change that if I need to, and that will apply to every question in that set. The most important thing to think about when you're thinking about random tests is the structure. It's possible that you could build a test for students using a pool involving 50 multiple choice questions and 50 true-false questions. But if you lumped all of those together in one test and just said, I've got 100 questions, I want each student to get 25 of these, you could wind up with one student who gets all multiple choice and one student who all gets true-false, which is kind of a problem from a distribution standpoint, and that's not a test that's equitable for students. So to get around that, it's important to think about how you structure your question sets in order to make sure that students are getting approximately the same types of questions in the same number, even if they're not getting actually the same questions. So to do that, I'm going to come back up here to question set. And if I go into my question set tool, I'm going to tell it that I want to have a look at all of the questions from all of my pools and all of my tests as well, just to add that one in there. And then if I come down a little bit further, I have this option called question types. And what that lets me do is isolate a particular type of questions. So let's say I'm interested in true-false. If I click on true-false, the only thing I'm going to see in this list is true-false questions. So I can tell Blackboard I want all of those. And then when I go back to my test canvas, I can tell it that I want each student to get 10 of those. So each student will get 10 true-false questions. And then I could come back up here, do the same thing again. Create question set. I want to see all the questions that I have available to me, but at this point, what I want to see are multiple choice questions. So if I choose multiple choice, I'm going to see a different set of questions. And then I can choose those. I can click on submit. I can tell Blackboard once again that I want each student to see 10 of those 25 multiple choice questions. So here I've set things up so that each student is guaranteed to get 10 of each question, which takes that distribution issue out of the equation. And you can do this for any question type. You can also narrow it down to be more granular to say that each student is going to get 5 questions from Unit 1 that are multiple choice, 5 questions from Unit 2 that are true-false, and 5 questions from Unit 3 that are fill in the blank. Whatever works for you, it's just worth thinking about that structure as you get going so that everything is equitable for all students.